Alrighty, guys. So today, let's pick up where we left off. So last time we talked about the unfortunate death of James Garfield and how he was killed by a job seeker, a man named Charles Guiteau. Garfield is succeeded by his vice president, Chester Arthur. Now, Chester Arthur, there he is, jowly man he is. Look at those sideburns and jowls, steely-eyed gaze. Um, Chester Arthur is like the poster child for what's wrong with government to some degree. If if you looked up a dictionary definition of cronyism, there'd be a picture of Chester Arthur. Chester Arthur's entire political career was built around getting jobs because people owed him a favor or um, he knew somebody who had a job available or he was related to somebody who had a job. Arthur is everything that Hayes and to some degree Garfield were working against. In fact, Chester Arthur had been one of the people fired by Rutherford B. Hayes from his executive branch job because he wasn't qualified. And, less than 4 years later, he's a president of the United States. Funny how things work. Here's the kind of the quirky thing about Chester Arthur. As a guy who came in as vice president because the old guard Republicans didn't like the changes in civil service jobs, they didn't like the meritocracy idea. They wanted an old style political crony somewhere in the executive branch. So they got the vice president. Nobody liked Chester Arthur. Nobody really trusted him. I mean, everybody knew that Arthur's career had been based on cronyism. What turns out to be so surprising is underneath the whole cronyism and massive jowls and bad facial hair, Arthur's a pretty smart guy, and he's also a pretty darn good politician. One of the first things that Arthur did was he went before Congress to talk to them about, when he had been just after he was inaugurated. He walks in and he's like, I'm here today because of the death of our beloved President Garfield. But it wasn't the assassin's bullet that killed Garfield. It was all of you here in Congress because Garfield wanted to pass a civil service law. He wanted to make sure that people couldn't get jobs just because they knew somebody or they were supporters, that they needed to be qualified, and all of you refused to do it. One of those people was Charles Guiteau, the man who shot Garfield. Now look at it. Garfield's dead. Whereas if the law had been in place, this wouldn't even be a question. So sign that law for the memory of Garfield and never let this happen again. It was brilliant. He guilt tripped his way into getting a law signed. And it worked out smashingly well. The ironic thing is that President Arthur, the guy who made his living out of political cronyism, is the guy who officially wipes out political cronyism by instituting government job reform, civil service reform. Additionally, Arthur had the rare benefit of having a budget surplus to deal with. That meant that there was more money available left over after the government spent its money, rather than letting Congress figure out what to do and they would have just wasted it. Garfield or Arthur pushed towards the idea of modernizing the Navy like Garfield wanted. And something that's neither new, unusual, or like particularly um, controversial, maybe. Arthur passed immigration restrictions. He said that people with disabilities were not welcome in the United States. Now, this may seem mean, but understand what he's really saying here. If you're physically or mentally disabled and you cannot help yourself, the government cannot help you. America cannot help you. You're on your own. And that's not fair to you. I'm sorry, you're just not going to be allowed here. If you have family here, that's a different issue. But if you're just coming here because you just want to start over again and you're somehow deficient, that's just not going to work. Additionally, he sort of limited Chinese immigration, largely because California was so freaked out about the number of Chinese people that were living in it. And whereas Hayes didn't really do anything to scale back Southern power and to, sort of push civil rights. Arthur did. He scaled back the power of Southern Democrats, preventing them from doing as many things they were abusing, and really sort of like got the civil rights thing rolling again. Unfortunately for Chester Arthur, he contracted or somehow came down with a kidney disease that forced him to step down and not seek reelection, or not seek election on his own. Um, the best that can be said for Chester Arthur is that he left office being respected by everybody, Democrat and Republican, for what he was able to achieve. And well, the next thing we'll do is look at the election of 1884 with two brand new candidates and some really wacky things going on. Okay, peace and love.